They say Rome wasn't built in a day. But a monster? A monster can be born in a single night. The night Nero entered the world, the sky screamed. Lightning didn't just flash, it exploded across the heavens like the gods themselves were trying to warn humanity. Thunder rattled the marble villa so violently that cracks appeared in the walls. Slaves whispered that it was an omen. They were right. In the birthing chamber, blood pooled on white marble, so much blood. The midwife stumbled out, her hands trembling, her face pale as death. "The child is born," she gasped to the guards. "May the gods have mercy on us all." Inside, Agrippina the Younger lay in that crimson darkness, holding her newborn son. But she wasn't looking at him with love. No, her eyes held something far more terrifying: hunger, ambition, madness. Her husband Gnaeus entered cautiously like a man approaching a wild animal. "A son," he whispered, "Lucius Domitius Ahenobarbus." Agrippina's lips curved into a smile that would haunt nightmares. "Not just a son," she hissed. "The future emperor of Rome." Gnaeus laughed nervously, trying to dispel the darkness in the room. "Your brother Caligula is emperor, wife. You dream impossible dreams." She turned her gaze on him, and in that moment, Gnaeus saw his own death reflected in her eyes. "For now," she whispered. 3 days later, Gnaeus would be dead. But that night, the real horror was only beginning. Little Lucius grew up in a palace of shadows and screams. His mother wasn't like other mothers. She didn't sing lullabies, she whispered of emperors and poison. She didn't tell bedtime stories, she plotted murders while he pretended to sleep. On the night that would break him forever, 5-year-old Lucius couldn't sleep. The villa was too quiet, the kind of quiet that comes before something terrible happens. He crept from his bed, his bare feet cold against marble floors that seemed to stretch into endless darkness. Voices echoed from his mother's chambers. Lucius pressed himself against the wall, his heart hammering, and peered through the crack in the door. What he saw would poison his dreams for the rest of his life. A servant lay on the floor, eyes wide and staring at nothing, mouth frozen in a silent scream. Foam crusted his lips, his fingers were clawed, as if he'd tried to tear the poison from his own throat. And standing over the corpse, calm as a summer day, was his mother. "The poison works quickly," Agrippina said to a hooded figure in the corner. "No screaming. Perfect for the emperor." The boy's breath caught. The sound was tiny, barely a gasp, but in that silent room, it was like thunder. Agrippina's head snapped toward the door. Her eyes locked with her son's through that narrow crack. They weren't human eyes anymore. They were the eyes of something ancient and evil that wore his mother's face like a mask. Lucius ran. His small feet slapped against stone as he fled down corridors that seemed to grow longer and darker with every step. Behind him he heard a door open, heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, coming closer. He dove into his bed and pulled the covers over his head, trembling so violently his teeth chattered. The door to his chamber opened with a creak that seemed to last forever. Torchlight flickered. A shadow fell across his bed, tall, looming, monstrous. "Were you spying on Mother, little one?" Her voice was soft, gentle, loving. That's what made it so terrifying. "No, Mother, I was sleeping." His voice was high and thin with fear. The bed sagged as she sat beside him. Her hand, cold, so cold, stroked his hair. "Good," she whispered, "because little boys who see too much have accidents." She leaned close. Her breath smelled like wine and something else, something sweet and chemical. Poison. "Like your father will have tomorrow." Lucius's blood turned to ice. "Father? Shh." She pressed a finger to his lips. "Tomorrow, you'll wake up with no father, but you'll be one step closer to a throne built on bones and blood." She kissed his forehead. Her lips were like ice, and left. The door closed. Darkness swallowed everything. Little Lucius lay there, tears streaming down his face, listening to his own ragged breathing. And somewhere in the villa, he heard his mother laughing like it was the funniest joke in the world. The next morning, screams shattered the peace. Slaves ran through the villa, wailing. Gnaeus's chariot had been found on the road, destroyed. His body was broken among the wreckage, twisted at impossible angles, his dead eyes staring at the sky. Officials examined the scene. "The axle," one said, frowning. This was no accident." "Are you suggesting something?" Agrippina's voice cut through the air like a blade. She stood there, young Lucius beside her, her hand gripping his shoulder so hard it left bruises. "My husband is dead. Show some respect." The official swallowed hard, seeing something in her eyes that made his survival instincts scream. Of course, Domina, a tragic accident, the axle was weak. Yes, Agrippina said, her nails digging deeper into Lucius's shoulder. Weak, like anyone who gets in my way. Little Lucius looked up at his mother and realized the truth. She was a monster. And he was trapped with her. That was the day innocence died. That was the day the nightmares began. Nightmares that would never ever stop. Time passed, but the horror only grew. Lucius became a teenager, but his eyes remained dead. The eyes of someone who'd seen too much, too young. His mother's ambitions grew like a cancer through Rome. Emperor Caligula, assassinated. Emperor Claudius took the throne, kind, stammering, foolish Claudius, and Agrippina seduced him, married him, and began her final, terrible plan. In the great throne room with all of Rome watching, Claudius proclaimed, I adopt Lucius Domitius as my son. He shall be called Nero Claudius Caesar. Standing nearby was Britannicus, Claudius's real son, only 14. As the crowd cheered, Britannicus leaned toward Nero and whispered, she's going to kill him, and then she's going to kill me, and you'll let her because you're too weak to stop her. Nero said nothing, because it was true. That night, Nero walked the palace corridors like a ghost haunting his own life. His tutor Seneca found him. The weight of destiny troubles you, Seneca observed. She's everywhere, Nero whispered, his voice cracking. Every shadow, every reflection. I can't escape her. I'll never escape her. Your mother ensures your greatness. Nero laughed, a sound like breaking glass. My mother is turning me into her. That's what terrifies me most. 3 nights later, at a private family dinner, the monster would feed again. The dining chamber was lit by flickering torches that cast dancing shadows on the walls, shadows that seemed to move on their own, reaching for the living. Emperor Claudius sat at the head of the table, Agrippina beside him, Nero and Britannicus facing each other. The air was thick with tension, heavy, like breathing underwater. I've been thinking, Claudius began, his stammer worse than usual. Perhaps Britannicus should share power with Nero when I... Husband, Agrippina's voice cut through the air. You're exhausted, eat. She placed a dish before him. Mushrooms, glistening with oil and herbs. Beautiful, deadly. I had them specially prepared, she purred. Claudius ate. Everyone watched in silence. The only sound was chewing, swallowing. Then Claudius's eyes went wide. His hand flew to his throat. The cup fell from his grip, wine spreading across the table like blood. His face turned red, then purple. I can't breathe. He stood, stumbling, knocking over his chair with a crash that echoed like a death knell. Father, Britannicus screamed, rushing to him. Guards! Agrippina's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. The emperor is having a seizure. Clear the room, now. Guards burst in, confused. Slaves scattered. In the chaos, Agrippina barked orders. Everyone out, only family stays. The door slammed shut, locked. Suddenly it was just the 4 of them, and the dying emperor. Claudius collapsed, his body convulsing violently. Foam poured from his mouth. His back arched, bones cracking. His eyes rolled back, showing only whites. What did you do? Britannicus sobbed. Agrippina pulled a feather from her robes, and Nero understood with horror what came next. She was going to make Claudius vomit up the poison, so it would look natural. But instead, she shoved the feather deep down his throat. Claudius's eyes bulged. He gagged, choked, his hands clawing at his neck, drawing blood. His face turned black. His tongue protruded, swollen and purple. No. Britannicus lunged at Agrippina, but she backhanded him with shocking strength. The boy crashed into the wall. Nero stood frozen, watching his stepfather die, watching his mother kill with her bare hands, unable to move, unable to scream, unable to do anything but watch. Finally, Claudius went still. His dead eyes stared at the ceiling, seeing nothing, seeing everything. Agrippina calmly arranged his body, smoothing his robes. She turned to Nero, not a hair out of place, not a drop of sweat on her brow. Congratulations, my son, you are Emperor of Rome. Nero couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The room spun. I gave you the world, Agrippina said, and you will give me everything I want, because you know what I'm capable of. She looked at Britannicus, still crying against the wall. And you, boy, will say nothing, or you'll join your father. The next day, Nero sat on the throne wearing the crown of Rome. But he looked like a prisoner in a gilded cage, and behind the throne, like a vulture perched on carrion, stood his mother. The real ruler of Rome. The years crawled by like wounded animals. Nero ruled, but Agrippina controlled. Every decision, every appointment, every breath Nero took, his mother owned. The nightmares grew worse. Nero would wake screaming, seeing his mother standing at the foot of his bed, smiling. Sometimes she was there, sometimes she wasn't. He couldn't tell anymore. He drank to forget, used drugs to sleep, but nothing worked. Her face was burned into his brain. Her voice echoed in his skull. And Britannicus watched, waited, threatened. At a grand feast in 55 AD, Britannicus stood drunk and shouted across the hall, "A toast to the emperor, who still suckles at his mother's breast." The crowd gasped. Laughter rippled through the room, nervous, uncertain. Nero sat perfectly still, his face a mask. But inside, something snapped. "Another toast," Nero said softly. Too softly. "To my beloved brother Britannicus, may he live a long, long life." A servant brought Britannicus wine. He drank deeply, grinning at his own boldness. 3 seconds later, his grin died. The cup fell from his hand and shattered. Britannicus clutched his throat, his eyes going wide with terror and understanding. He tried to speak, but only foam came out. His body went rigid. Then he convulsed, falling backward off his chair, crashing to the floor. His back arched impossibly high. His fingers clawed at the marble, nails breaking, leaving bloody trails. Screams erupted. Guests fled their seats. But Nero sat still, watching his stepbrother die, watching with those dead, hollow eyes. Britannicus's body jerked and twisted like a puppet with cut strings. Blood ran from his nose, his ears, his eyes. His face turned black. His tongue swelled, choking him, and then silence. Britannicus lay dead, his face frozen in a scream, his eyes staring at Nero in eternal accusation. "Epilepsy," Nero announced to the horrified crowd. "He's had fits since childhood. Continue eating." No one moved, no one breathed. Across the hall, Agrippina smiled. Proud, so proud of her monster. That night, she came to Nero's chambers, uninvited as always. "You've learned well. Get out." Nero's scream was primal, inhuman. He grabbed a wine pitcher and hurled it at her. It smashed against the wall, spraying red liquid like blood. "I made you emperor," she shrieked back. "You made me a monster." Nero's voice broke, tears streamed down his face. "Everything I am, everything I've become, you did this to me." "I can destroy you," Agrippina hissed. "One word to the Senate and you're finished." "No." Nero's voice went quiet, deadly quiet. "You can't. Not anymore." She turned to leave, paused at the door. "The astrologer said you'd kill me." Their eyes met across the room. "So kill me then," she whispered, "if you have the strength." The door closed. Nero stood in the ruins of his chamber, trembling, his mother's words echoing, "Kill me. Kill me. Kill me." That night, Nero went to Seneca. "She haunts me, sleeping, waking, she's in my head, I'm losing my mind." Seneca watched his student carefully. "Then remove the source of your torment." "You mean?" "An accident," Seneca said softly. "The sea is treacherous. Boats sink." Nero looked up, and in his eyes something flickered, something dark. Something his mother had planted there years ago. "Like her," he whispered. The moon hung bloated and red over the Bay of Baiae. A blood moon, sailors called it. Bad luck. Death on the water. Agrippina reclined on cushions aboard a luxurious boat, enjoying the cool night air. She didn't see the sabotaged hull beneath her. Didn't know her son stood on the shore watching. "It's ready," Commander Anicetus whispered. "The collapse will look natural." Nero nodded, unable to speak. This was it. Freedom, or damnation. Do it. On the water, there was a sound like the world breaking. Crack. Crack! Crack! The ship split down the middle like a rotten fruit. Screams pierced the night as the Mediterranean rushed in, cold and black and hungry. Agrippina plunged into the water, robes dragging her down. She clawed for the surface, gasping. Her servant grabbed her arm, panicking, pulling them both under. "Nero!" Agrippina's scream carried across the water. "Help me!" But Agrippina was a survivor, always had been. She kicked free of her servant, letting the woman drown, and struck out for shore with powerful strokes. Nero watched in horror as his carefully planned assassination fell apart. "She's swimming!" His voice was high, panicked. "She's coming!" Anicetus drew his sword, the blade gleaming red in the moonlight. "Then we finish this on land." Agrippina dragged herself onto the beach, coughing up seawater, hair plastered to her skull. She looked like a drowned corpse come back to life. She staggered toward her villa as Nero and his men disappeared into the shadows. Inside her chambers, Agrippina barricaded the door, finally allowing herself to shake. Her son had tried to kill her, her own son, but she'd survived. She always survived. Then came the pounding. Boom, boom. Open. By order of the emperor. The door exploded inward. 3 soldiers stormed in, swords drawn, torches throwing their shadows huge and monstrous against the walls. Anicetus led them, his face grim. Agrippina backed away, water still dripping from her hair, her clothes. My son wouldn't dare, she said, but her voice trembled. Your son commanded it, Anicetus replied. For the first time in her life, Agrippina felt fear. Real, true, bone-deep terror. This was how her victims had felt, how Gnaeus felt, how Claudius felt. How everyone she'd ever murdered felt in their final moments. And then something shifted in her eyes. Acceptance, defiance, one last act of dominance. She tore open her robes, exposing her bare stomach, scarred and pale in the torchlight. Then strike here, she commanded, her voice ringing with imperial authority. Strike the womb that birthed that ungrateful monster. Anicetus hesitated for only a heartbeat. Then he drove his sword into her belly. She gasped, not a scream but a small, surprised sound, like she couldn't believe it was actually happening. He stabbed again, each thrust accompanied by the wet sound of steel and flesh. Blood poured from her mouth, her nose. She collapsed, her hands pressed to her wounds, trying to hold herself together. I made you, she gurgled, blood bubbling on her lips. I made you? Emperor. Her eyes found the doorway, and somehow, impossibly, Nero was there, watching, his face pale, his eyes wide. Ungrateful boy. Her final breath rattled out. She died with her eyes open, staring at her son, accusing him, condemning him, forever. Nero stood in the doorway, frozen, staring at his mother's corpse. Blood pooled around her body, spreading across the marble like spilled wine. So much blood, more than seemed possible. It's done, Caesar, Anicetus said quietly. Nero began to laugh. A horrible, broken, inhuman sound that made the soldiers step back in fear. He laughed and laughed until he was crying, until he couldn't tell the difference anymore. She's dead, he gasped. Finally dead, finally dead. But even as he said it, he saw something that made his blood freeze. Her eyes. They moved, just a fraction, just enough. No, Nero whispered. No, no, no. Caesar? Anicetus asked nervously. Burn the body, Nero screamed. Burn it until there's nothing left. But burning her body didn't help, because 3 nights later, Nero woke to find her standing at the foot of his bed, soaked, bloody, dead, but not gone. Did you really think it would be that easy? Her voice was waterlogged, gurgling. I made you, boy. I'm part of you, forever. He blinked, and she was gone. But she came back. Every night. Sometimes standing in corners, sometimes sitting beside him, sometimes just a shadow or a reflection or a voice in his head. The servants whispered that the emperor was going mad. They heard him screaming at empty rooms, saw him having conversations with no one, watched him spin around terrified, attacking shadows. Months passed. Nero aged decades. His hair went gray, his face became gaunt, his eyes were sunken pits. He sat on his throne, supposedly ruling the greatest empire in the world, but he was really just a haunted shell. Mother, he whispered to the empty throne room. I killed you like you always knew I would. He laughed, that broken, terrible laugh. But you won, didn't you? You made me into you. I am your legacy, your curse, your monster. He walked to a mirror. In the reflection, Agrippina stood behind him, her hands on his shoulders. He spun around, nothing there. Caesar, Seneca's voice came from the doorway. The Senate is waiting. Nero turned, his face a mask of imperial composure. But his eyes were the eyes of a man already dead. Let them wait, he said. I am emperor. For 9 more years the haunting continued. Nero became the tyrant history would remember. Burning Rome, executing senators, murdering wives. Every cruelty, every atrocity, every horror. All of it was his mother's training. She'd created the perfect monster. In 68 AD, with rebellion closing in and nowhere left to run, Emperor Nero pressed a dagger to his throat. His last words were, "What an artist dies in me." But the slaves who found his body swore they heard something else. A woman's voice, laughing, triumphant. And in the blood pooling around Nero's corpse, some said they saw a reflection, a woman's face, smiling. Agrippina had won. Even in death, even from beyond the grave, she had won. Because the monster she created finally destroyed itself. And in the ruins of Rome, as fires burned and citizens wept, they whispered a truth that would echo throughout history. The most terrifying monsters aren't born, they are made.